Plantar fasciitis is a common condition, especially in the running community. It is generally thought of as an overload condition, meaning that the loads placed on the plantar fascia during running exceeded what it could tolerate, leading to pain. But can we change the loads that we're placing on the plantar fascia during running by changing our step rate? A study by James Jared and Daniel Bonanno, published in the Scandinavian Journal of Medicine and Science in Sport, looked at the pressures on the foot during running at 5 different paces. In the study, there were 32 recreational runners that were included. The paces that they chose were the preferred step rate for each of the runners, plus or minus 5% of the preferred step rate, and then plus or minus 10% of their preferred step rate. And all of these were measured for 2 minutes while on the treadmill. The study found that a 10% increase in step rate resulted in a significant reduction in both maximum force as well as peak pressures applied to the tissues in the rear foot during running. The study also found that a 10% increase in step rate had a significant reduction in the pressures applied to the midfoot for maximum force, but not peak pressure. And then finally, what the study found for the forefoot was that there was no significant difference in the forces that were applied to the tissues in the forefoot with alterations in step rate. The implications of the findings in this study suggest that we can change the loads that we're placing on the tissues on the bottom of the foot by altering the step rate. Specifically, if we increase the step rate by 10% of whatever the runner's preferred step rate is, that we can offload the tissues in both the rear foot and also the midfoot. And this is important when we look at overload conditions commonly experienced during running, such as plantar fasciopathy or plantar fasciitis, in that if we increase the step rate by 10%, then we can offload the tissues on the bottom of the foot, so we don't have to completely stop any sort of running. We can actually offload the tissues of the bottom of the foot by just increasing that step rate. One potential issue, and this was mentioned in the study as well, is that these measurements were only the loads placed on the foot per step. And so since running is a repetitive activity, the total volume of load that we're placing on the tissues of the foot can remain the same if we run for a longer period of time or if it's a little bit more intense. And so to take advantage of this, we need to make sure that the volume is actually reduced when we run and not just per step, because if we run a little bit longer, let's say, the amounts of loads that we're placing on those tissues on the foot would remain the same. And also of note, one potential limitation of this study is that the loads on the foot were only measured for 2 minutes. And so we don't know how fatigue or how the biomechanics will change if we run for more than 2 minutes, but we can use the information in this study as a little bit of a guidance with that 10% to modify the loads that we're placing on the foot during running. To take advantage of this information, the first step that we would need to do, pun intended, is figure out what the runner's preferred step rate actually is. And so there's a couple different ways that we can do this. The first way, potentially the easier way, is that we would run on a treadmill and we'd film ourselves. And so obviously we're going to get a lot of information as well with this method, not only just our preferred step rate, but also biomechanically what our foot does during running. And so what we would do is we'd film ourselves for about a minute, and then we would just count the amount of steps that we took in that minute, and that would be our step rate. The other method that we could do is that we would need a timer, and so either on your phone or on your watch or something like that, and you would run outside for 30 to 60 seconds, and you would just count the amount of steps that you took in that time frame. If you ran for 30 seconds, then you would just multiply it by 2. If it was a minute, then that's just your step rate. And so the benefit of this method is that it's actually naturally running and there's no influence of the treadmill, although they're probably going to be pretty similar. Most runners are typically between 150 and 170 steps per minute. And then to apply this information during running, we would take our preferred step rate, add 10%, and that would give us our targeted step rate during our run. One way that we can change our step rate during running is that we can download a metronome app. Granted, this is a very boring way to do it, but it's probably the most accurate. And so what we would do is we'd set the metronome to 180 beats per minute if that's what we're trying to achieve, and then we'd run to that cadence. And so our body will kind of naturally sync with that, so we'll actually be hitting 180 or at least close to 180 steps per minute. The other way that we can do it, and it's a much more enjoyable way, is that we'll find songs that actually have 180 beats per minute. And that way we'll run to music, which is much more enjoyable than the metronome, but will achieve a very similar effect. Thank you for watching this episode on how changing your step rate can decrease the loads that you're placing on the foot. I hope that you found this information useful. If you did, go ahead and give this video a big thumbs up. If you want to see more of my content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well. If you want to be notified when I post new videos, hit the bell icon as well. And if you're a runner, let me know in the comments below what you're currently training for. I'll see you guys in the next video.